What's good with the YouTube with Convicts Perspective? It's your boy Flacco coming live and direct, smashing through with my co-host Senor Rojo with a whole lot of energy, man. What's good with it out there, man? As always, man, we got an interesting topic for you guys, man. We're going to be talking about the demise of one Robert Viramontes, Brown Bob, you know what I'm saying, from Morgan Hill. A very historical figure in the NF history. At one time, held one of the OGB seats. Had been an NF member from way back in the 70s, man. He was one of the last of that dying breed from back then in the 70s, man. And we're gonna also go into a little bit of perspective of the things that we know about this individual, his contributions to the organization, the changes he wanted to do in society, and so forth, man. I'm gonna let Rojo take it over right now and read an article that probably some of you guys may be familiar with, but it's very detailed out.
All right, man. This article is by one Justin Burton, man. It like Flacco said, man, it's an older article, man, but it breaks down everything pretty good, man. And we'll get right to it, man. It says, how do you punish a prison gang that thrives in prison? Let them kill off their own members one by one. Robert Viramontes was watering his rose bushes the day that his assassins came for him. He was standing in front of his home in Campbell, California on Palo Santo Drive, his back to the streets. Viramontes, 44 years old, also known as Brown Bob, had spent most of his life inside California state prisons, rising to become one of the highest ranking members of Nuestra Familia, the notoriously vicious Northern California Latino prison gang. After serving the NF for 20 years, Viramontes had paroled for good. He was enjoying his new life in semi-retirement, which the Nuestra Familia Constitution guarantees to any member who survives 2 decades or reaches the age of 50. In gang terms, it was supposed to be the only way to get out alive. Viramontes moved into a 1-story home on a nice wide street and lived there quietly with his wife of 22 years, Esperanza, and their 2 sons, ages 17 and 6. After 2 years of suburban living, he had strayed far away from gang business altogether and spent Sunday afternoons tinkering on his Chevy pickup truck, which he nicknamed Lucille. The biggest disturbance came from the scores of local gang unit hotshots who stopped by the home continually hoping to gain inside information on NF in exchange for any, say, future parole violations. Yet, associates say Viramontes never rolled over on his former associates. Instead, he spoke to young gangsters through a program called Mothers Against Gangs, preaching against the thug's life, period. He hired tattoo artists to cover the massive Nuestra Familia emblem across his back. He worked honest jobs, mopping floors and cleaning offices. He took up gardening. On April 19, 1999, at about 6:45 p.m., a Ford Explorer carrying 3 young men pulled up to the curb in front of Viramontes' home. It had been stolen from a driveway in the Rose Garden neighborhood from an owner who kept a key in the glove box. The driver, Albert Beto Avila, waited at the wheel while 2 men leapt out from the passenger side doors. Both wore T-shirts and shorts. The first shooter was named David Dreamer Escamilla, a member of NF's Bush League, the Northern Structure, who was out on parole after doing time for attempted murder. The other shooter, Santos Bad Boy Bernias, was a longtime NF member who had also done a stint for attempted murder. A fourth person, Antonio Chuco Guillen, the San Jose NF underboss, supervised from another car parked down the street. Dreamer and Bad Boy walked up the driveway toward Viramontes and both began shooting. Viramontes turned toward his open garage and tried to run into his home. As he crawled toward the door, Viramontes was hit 7 times in the chest, back, legs, and arms. 1 bullet grazed his left cheek. Dreamer got so close to his target, blood spattered back onto his hands. Esperanza, who was making dinner in the kitchen, ran out of the front door, around to the driveway, and watched the assassins pile into the SUV. She pointed at them and screamed, "What have you motherfuckers done?" One of the men stuck a gun out the window and pointed at her. Then they drove away. The murder of Robert Viramontes was, like most hits of higher-ups, ordered from inside Pelican Bay State Prison, Nuestra Familia's headquarters, located on a desolate patch of earth near the Oregon border. Pelican Bay is a bloody place. In the past 3 years alone, 9 inmates have been killed at the hands of their fellow inmates. In one riot last year involving 250 inmates, 32 prisoners were stabbed and 1 was killed by a guard's bullet to the back of the head. Only California's most violent inmates are sent to the Bay, and only the most violent of those are locked up inside the Prison Security Housing Unit, or SHU, where inmates are kept in their cells 23 hours a day. Today, all NF lords live inside the SHU. The NF mantra is blood in, blood out, and Viramontes satisfied the first part of the deal in 1978 when he and NF members were convicted of manslaughter for hanging an inmate they thought was a snitch. Viramontes didn't stick around for the consequences. He escaped from Monterey County Jail, fled to Mexico with his wife, and was captured after several armed robberies and assaults. He did his time in San Quentin State Prison, the unofficial birthplace of Nuestra Familia, and adopted to the gangster's lifestyle. Viramontes was well read on all subjects and well known for his charisma. As a rising star, he was responsible for indoctrinating the up-and-coming talent to the two major tenets of the NF, to promote the Mexican race and swearing a lifetime of allegiance to one another. Recruits were schooled in making weapons, Mexican-American history, and boot camp-like chants used at night to intimidate other inmates as they slept. Once chosen, any NF member who betrayed his fellow carnals was subject to Article 2, Section 5 of the NF Constitution. An automatic death sentence will be put on any familiano who turns traitor, coward, or deserter. Viramontes' devotion to the gang promoted him to the highest echelon of the NF, the Select Organizational Governing Board, also known as La Mesa. There are currently an estimated 1,000 NF members, both inside and outside prison, and the vast majority are soldiers. Above them are lieutenants and the captains. At the top of the pyramid is La Mesa, a three-man tribunal. La Mesa approves membership, oversees promotions and policy changes, and more often than not, order sits on its own members. When Viramontes first paroled from San Quentin in 1992, he returned to his home in the South Bay and took his first step toward leaving the NF. He approached Mothers Against Gangs about being a speaker for them, getting so nervous for his first presentation that he asked his family to wait outside. After each subsequent speech, he took notes on his own performance. He transformed his body to cover the giant NF tattoo on his back. At the same time, the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office was engaging in an expensive and thorough war against Nuestra Familia, a war that would eventually tangle up Viramontes. The DA's investigation targeted two back-to-back slayings of known F members on the east side, and concluded with the massive indictment of 21 NF members for racketeering and murder. Preparing for the high-profile trial, the judge considered building a makeshift courtroom, one loaded with heavy security. In the end, the county spent more than $10 million on prosecution and security costs. And of the original 21 defendants, only 4 were convicted. The rest took guilty pleas and made deals. Viramontes was subpoenaed to testify to the grand jury, but was one of the few who refused to talk about his role in the gang. The answers he did give contradicted other sworn testimony. In the process, Viramontes was convicted of perjury and sent back to San Quentin in 1994. When Viramontes returned to San Quentin, word spread quickly through the intricate NF communication network that in his 2 years on the outside, the man known as Brown Bob, once one of the hardest, most trusted bosses, had turned soft. How the rap spread is unknown, but NF members who are sometimes separated from one another for their gang affiliation can share information in a variety of ways. They can fly kites, or huilas, which are small notes attached to a strand of elastic pulled from the waistbands of their jumpsuits, which are then expertly flung into another cell. They can make phone calls to members in other prisons via three-ways by simultaneously phoning a member on the outside who holds the two phones to one another. They can hide coded writings and documents, such as hit lists, inside the reams of legal papers, which are off limits to guard searches, and use their lawyers as unwitting couriers, or they can simply talk face-to-face on the exercise yard. Inside San Quentin, Viramontes came across Chuco, the San Jose NF underboss, who was in for drug possession charge. Chuco noticed Viramontes' back and saw his recently tattooed Aztec figure disguising his NF emblem of a large sombrero with a knife and 3 drops of blood. According to NF member Anthony Chavo Jacobs, who by seniority had the keys to the yard and was responsible for all that went down in the exercise area, Viramontes' cover-up tattoo work caused Chuco to feel ashamed. And when Chuco learned Viramontes had spoken on behalf of Mothers Against Gangs, Chuco remarked, "He's poisoning young minds." Then Viramontes made what proved to be two fatal mistakes. Through the network, Viramontes announced he's wanted to revise the gang's policy on door pops at the aging San Quentin facility. Rows of cell doors sometimes malfunction and open unexpectedly, and sometimes inmates intentionally jam their cell doors and pry them open. Whenever the doors popped, NF policy called for an instantaneous attack on all enemies. According to Jacobs, who distributed Viramontes' directive, Viramontes suggested NF members now simply stand their ground and act aggressively only if the enemy acts aggressively. Viramontes followed the first policy revision with another. He called for a truce with NF's greatest enemy, the Mexican Mafia, also known as the MA. The Mexican Mafia is comprised of Sureños or Southerners, while NF is strictly Norteño gang. Norteños are any Hispanic gang member who lives north of Fresno. Likewise, Sureños are from points south of Fresno. The long-standing NF Mexican Mafia edict had been simple: kill the enemy whenever possible. Brown Bob's call for peace was not well received. The two issues put Viramontes under investigation by his fellow La Mesa officers in prison. Viramontes' declarations caused severe discontent among the rank and file beneath him. Factions formed. Whenever policy disputes arise among heavyweights within the NF, the winning platform goes to the boss who lives the longest. So much for lifelong loyalty. In early 1998, fellow La Mesa heavyweight Gerald Cuete Rubalcaba ordered Viramontes dead. The filter or official paperwork announcing the hit came down to Jacobs, who by this time had developed a close friendship with Viramontes. Jacob told Viramontes he was marked, but promised he wouldn't let it happen in his yard. On the outside, however, both knew things were different. If you see me coming with another person, run, Jacobs told Viramontes, because I'm not coming to shake hands. From that moment, Viramontes could have requested to hide in protected custody. Most inmates who prove they've been issued a death sentence usually do. Viramontes chose to stay put. On the yard, enemy Chuco volunteered to kill Viramontes immediately. He followed protocol and went to Jacobs first, but Jacobs denied him, creating a story to save Viramontes. Jacobs reasoned the yard hit was a waste of manpower. It took 2 soldiers to hold Viramontes down and a third to knife him. The gang was low on numbers in Quentin, and sending 3 men to solitary wasn't worth it. They're already in solitary. Chuco agreed. He'd wait until they got outside. It was 2 years until Chuco made good on his word. At first, it seemed that the wait had been worth it, and the hit had gone well. Immediately after Viramontes was left for dead in his Campbell garage, Beto drove Dreamer and Bad Boy in the SUV to a waiting car at the Valencia apartments on Bud Avenue as planned. Chuco, satisfied the killing had been a success, took off in another direction. At the exchange point, driver Beto's responsibility was to burn the stolen Ford Explorer of fingerprints. He could wipe it down or set it on fire. It was his choice. Beto had 9 children, all from the same woman. He made money dealing crank and did tattoos on the side. His own skin bore all the typical gang markings. Sanjo soldier on his neck, X4 above his left ear, Norte on his hand, 2 more suggested NF affiliation, a Huelga bird on his neck, and a solid 5-point star, representing the North Star on his forehead. Yet Beto wasn't an official NF member. He'd last visited prison way back in 1993, and he'd never come within sniffing distance of the shoe at Pelican Bay. Still, he hoped the Viramontes hit was his ticket to the NF. At about 8 p.m., a little more than an hour after the murder, the 4 men checked into the penthouse suite at the Residence Inn in Sunnyvale. Ringleader Chuco Sancha, or mistress, Nadine Serrano, used her credit card to get the room while the men waited in the parking lot. More women showed up later to join the 3 others, and by 11 p.m., they were all in the pool swimming. Serrano brought a camera with her and pictures showed various poses of Dreamer, Bad Boy, Chuco, and Beto, arm in arm, drinking beer, eating pizza, sitting in the hot tub. But sometime during the party, Beto made a disturbing confession to Dreamer. Beto admitted that in the rush to finish the job, he forgot to wipe down the steering wheel or any other door handles for fingerprints. Dreamer had also hoped the Viramontes hit would quell any doubts about his loyalty to the NF, just shook his head. David Dreamer Escamilla grew up on San Jose's east side as the nephew of a Santa Clara County Sheriff's deputy. Instead of following a path into law enforcement, young David helped start a gang, the East Side Hoods. He did a stint in the California Youth Authority in his early teens escaped and within 48 hours participated in a drive-by shooting on gang rivals from the back of a Mazda pickup truck. No one was killed, but several were wounded. David got his nickname, according to one friend, from a girlfriend who teased him about his utopian visions of the future. Another associate says David was quiet and spent a lot of time by himself. In reality, Dreamer carried a gun in his waistband, graffitified his body in gang tattoos, and shook down punks for a game. During an interview with a detective who was investigating Dreamer's role in a homicide, Dreamer boasted he practiced his shooting skills on rabbits. They're real fast, Dreamer said. You have to be a good shot. In prison, Dreamer joined Northern Structure, a recruiting gang for the more prestigious NF. Northern Structure members, who do much of the heavy lifting for the NF to prove their worthiness, are considered hermanos until the day they get pulled into the NF. Then they are carnal. In September 1998, after Dreamer paroled for attempted murder, he celebrated his return to society with his family at a barbecue. Guests included his uncle Frank, the deputy with the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office. Also in attendance was Frank's son, Ray, a first cousin of Dreamer who was about the same age. Ray wanted to become a police officer like his father and had completed training at the police academy and the correction academy for prison guards. After the barbecue, even though they were operating on different sides of the law, Dreamer kept in contact with his cousin. Dreamer didn't keep in touch with his uncle Frank, but their paths would cross no matter. On the Tuesday morning after the killing, Dreamer sought refuge with his older brother Angel at his East Side home. Angel said Dreamer carried a copy of that morning's San Jose Mercury News, which contained a blurb about a gang boss's murder in Campbell. Dreamer didn't offer much in the way of an explanation to his brother. Dreamer just said that the person was no good and he had to be dealt with. Dreamer spent a few days hiding out at Angel's house, watching television, drinking Budweiser beer, making phone calls, and thinking about his next move. On Thursday, April 22nd, Dreamer called his cousin Ray and asked him to pass along an important message to his uncle Frank. Stay away from Brown Bob's funeral. A second hit was happening at the service, Dreamer said, on a man named Alex, and he didn't want his uncle caught in the crossfire. Ray called his father and learned that indeed he was scheduled to work security detail at the service. Sometime after Ray's phone call, Deputy Frank Lopez drove to his mother's house that night for a meeting with his sister, Dreamer's mother. In his grand jury testimony, Lopez quotes himself as informing his sister, "Your son may be involved in a homicide." In a flurry of phone calls from his mother's house at about 9:30 p.m., Lopez finally reached his other nephew, Angel. According to Angel's testimony, his uncle Frank told him first that he didn't want to know anything that was happening, and second, that Dreamer should turn himself into authorities. Then Lopez asked Angel to pass another message to Dreamer, one that contradicts his advice for Dreamer to turn himself in, Angel testified. I had told Dreamer what my uncle told me, for him not to show up somewhere the next day because he would get in trouble the next day. Near midnight, Angel and his uncle Frank spoke again in a tearful conversation. According to his testimony later, Lopez didn't think to ask Angel if Dreamer was involved in the Viramontes homicide. He also didn't think to ask Angel to review Dreamer's whereabouts. I was too emotional to think about it, Lopez said. The next morning, Lopez briefed the Morgan Hill Police Department on everything he claimed to know, that sources told him a hit was planned at the Viramontes funeral on their turf, and then it involved a man named Alex. But Lopez didn't tell the officers that his sources were his son, Ray, and his nephew, Angel. The funeral was loaded with well-armed officers in SWAT gear and a helicopter buzzing up overhead. After the service, Frank Lopez says he drove from Morgan Hill to the Campbell Police Department. He only got as far as the parking lot when he ran into an investigator and asked if his nephew Dreamer was involved in the Viramontes slaying. Lopez said the investigator told him no. The hit on Alex, an NF member who had refused Dreamer's invitation to assist in killing Brown Bob, never went down. But things began to worsen for the four men on the run. On April 24th, Chuco and Bad Boy drove up to South San Francisco to escape the heat coming from the Campbell investigation. Whenever gang hits go down, parolees are the first bodies rounded up and interviewed. For the ride north, the two men brought along their girlfriends, Nadine Serrano and Leonia Rodriguez. They all hid out at a fellow NF member's apartment just off Highway 101. Nadine later told investigators she was inside sitting on the couch listening to music when she spotted a red boxing glove, the smaller, lighter make typically used for sparring. She picked up the glove and found a 9mm handgun inside, the one Bad Boy furnished in the Viramontes hit. NF policy explicitly states that any gun used in crime be immediately disposed of. But Bad Boy declared that he had fallen in love with that particular weapon. He also reasoned the San Jose regiment was underarmed, so he kept the 9mm with him and slid it into a red sparring glove for safekeeping. Bad Boy had done time in juvenile hall for armed robbery and longer stints in state prison for felony burglary and attempted murder. He was in chronic poor health due to mostly cirrhosis of the liver, and he maintained a nasty cough. He spoke often about his death being near. While on the run, Bad Boy talked of going out like a true soldier and never going back to prison. At about 9 p.m., Chuco, Bad Boy, Nadine, and Leonia all piled into Chuco's car. They brought the red sparring glove along. Chuco drove with Nadine at his side, Bad Boy and Leonia in the back seat. The car slowed to a four-way stop before heading on the 101 near the Interstate 280 crossing. At the stop, a police car waited. Chuco waved for the officer to go first, but the officer declined. When Chuco went through the intersection, a wave of cop cars suddenly surrounded them. A brake light shined into the car. Chuco looked over his shoulder in the back seat at Bad Boy. "What do you want to do, bro?" Bad Boy said, "Take off." Chuco hit the gas pedal and made it to the freeway in a few seconds. Sirens chased him. Leonia turned and looked behind her and screamed that cops were everywhere. Someone inside the car started calling for the 9mm gun. On the freeway, Chuco reached speeds over 80 miles an hour, but traffic thickened, so he was forced to stay straight to the shoulder. Finally, the traffic clogged all lanes to a stop, so Chico veered off to the side of the road. As the car rolled to a stop, Chuco reached over Nadine's lap, flung open the door, slid over her body, and ran. 10 feet later, an officer tackled him to the ground. The others in the car, including Bad Boy, gave no fight. Dreamer and Beto, meanwhile, were still running strong for nearly 1 full month. They bounced around among family and friends, staying a few nights with Dreamer's brother, Angel, and a few nights in the home of a grandmother of 22-year-old norteño named Rudy Night Owl Moreno. Night Owl's grandmother was on vacation. Dreamer and Beto kept in contact with Chuco and Bad Boy via three-ways and letters. The two kept moving. On May 14th, Dreamer, Beto, and their new friend Night Owl all met at Nadine Serrano's home on Joe DiMaggio Court at about 9 p.m. According to testimony to the grand jury, Dreamer received a phone call from the San Mateo County Jail, a call from Bad Boy. At the end of their conversation, Dreamer pointed to Beto, who was sitting in another room, and said, "This fool is through. The filters had come down, and Beto's time had come." Dreamer, however, told the story differently on his two friends in the house. He told Beto and Night Owl that they had just gotten a green light for a hit in the East San Jose foothills. He didn't say who. At Dreamer's direction, the three piled into Beto's beater, a four-door white Hyundai. The back seat carried a 12-pack of Budweiser. Dreamer rode shotgun. Beto drove. When Beto reached Mount Pleasant Road near Higuera, whatever it is, Dreamer told Beto to stop the car. They'd walk the rest of the way. As the men hiked up the hill, another car passed by and the driver flashed the high beams. The driver later told authorities it was unusual to see anyone walking along the shoulder of Mount Pleasant Road, especially if it wasn't a neighbor. She passed the men and drove up the road and turned up onto her driveway. Beto had his suspicions. He knew he blew the job by not wiping the fingerprints from the car using the Viramontes hit. And he knew Dreamer was angry about it. And yet he told a friend he hoped that his paperwork validating gang membership would be showing up any day. On the way up into the hills, Beto offered to be the gunman for the hit. He said he wanted to earn his stripes. As Beto walked ahead, Dreamer and Night Owl dropped behind and Beto said, "But if I ever get taken out, I want it to be you, Dreamer." Dreamer replied, "Shut the fuck up." The driver who had passed by earlier walked down her driveway now back toward Mount Pleasant Road to check her mailbox. As she walked, she heard gunshots, maybe 5 or 6, and she saw flares of reddish yellow light. And then she saw figures of 2 bodies running away into the dark back down the hill. She returned to her house and retrieved a lantern. She ran down to the road, this time joined by her husband, and found Beto's body lying face down in the dirt, blood running downhill. Beto had been hit twice in the head and a third time in the chest. The couple called police. Dreamer and Night Owl ran to Beto's car, but they couldn't start it. The keys were in Beto's pocket. The 2 men ran through the hills toward the flatlands of the east side. Beto's body fell on unincorporated county land, so the homicide investigation turned to the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office. One of the first officers on the scene was Deputy Frank Lopez. The next afternoon, Saturday, May 15th, Dreamer met up with his brother Angel to pick up tuxedos. The two brothers had dates to the prom at James Lick High School. Angel had arranged the evening. His girlfriend had a younger sister, age 18, who needed a date. The two couples went Dutch. They danced at the Decathlon Club and posed for pictures. In one, Dreamer flashed his XIV hand sign. Later, the foursome partied in a room at the Embassy Suites. The two brothers listened to a CD, West Side Connection, to a song titled The Gangster, the Killer, and the Dope Dealer. According to Dreamer's prom date, she had another suitor in mind, but preferred not to go with Dreamer. But I was afraid of hurting Angel or David's feelings, she said. She added that Dreamer didn't mention what he had done the night before. But that night, Dreamer made an important disclosure to Angel. He told his brother Beto messed up bad and had to be dealt with. Angel later told the grand jury he felt bad that Beto had to be murdered, but it had to be done. Dreamer's time was running out. After his weekends at the prom, he left Angel's house and took refuge at a resident in Milpitas. For 3 days, Dreamer sat in the garage getting tattoos drilled into his skin by a friend, Chris Joker Alvarez. In a move that would later delight police and prosecutors, Dreamer had Alvarez illustrate the last month of his life on his forearm. Alvarez inked in two skulls, both with bullet holes representing Viramontes and Beto. Above them, in block lettering, 187. In between the skulls, a smoking gun. Alvarez was working on another tattoo, an Oakland Raiders shield, on Dreamer's midriff when they took a break one afternoon, May 28th. Dreamer's hosts had children and were planning to go on a field trip with their schoolmates. As a favor to his host, Dreamer went along to chaperone the young children. He walked his young friends to the school just a few blocks away. As the yellow school buses lined up in the parking lot, parents and children waited to board. Officers swarmed in on Dreamer. The arrest, according to the mother who had harbored Dreamer, was troubling for her child, and the entire school. One of the first people Dreamer ran into in the Santa Rita jail in Alameda was Anthony Chavo Jacobs. Jacobs' duty as a senior NF member in the jail was to interrogate any Northern Structure NF member regarding the circumstances leading to his arrest. Then Jacobs was to file a report to his superiors at Pelican Bay. All right, man, there's a lot more to the article, man, and I might read the rest later, but it's touched on all the major issues about the case in question. And Flacco's going to point out some things that were either inaccurate or misrepresented or something like that. Ain't that right, Flacco?
Okay, yeah. First and foremost, he brought up the policy about the no door policy in San Quentin. We've all done time in ADSEG. Those doors are locked. The only way that they're open in San Quentin is by the key of a correctional officer. Am I right or wrong?
Absolutely correct.
So all that. The other thing that I noticed that they talk about was the green that he wanted to forge a peace treaty with the Mexican mafia. I never heard that. In fact, he had old man Rafas kicked, if I'm not mistaken, for trying to start a peace treaty with the governor with the NF and the MA. If I'm not mistaken, there was issues regarding that.
That's what I had heard as well.
Thing that I seen on there as well would be, they didn't touch base. They touched base upon the murder, right, of Brown Bob, right? How they hit Beto, but they didn't disclose this additional information that's known. They were seen in these vehicles eating Jack in the Box at a location down the street from where the murder happened. CSI analysts were able to go over there and get extract DNA from the litter that they left outside their car. So these guys were going to get wrapped up regardless. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Another thing that people may want to know about this situation, right? Dreamer Escamilla, he flipped during Operation Black Widow. That's a fact. I remember getting the filter. Bad Boy, right? He's on bad terms. So all these dudes except for Chuco and then Night Owl, who came in later into the picture, who I ran into in Salinas Valley back in I want to say 2002. Everybody that's involved in that lifestyle, man, from these choices and decisions, look where they ended up. You know what I'm saying? As well as with Cafe, which is another name that they used to call Brown Bob for years, man. His code name was always called Cafe. Any old NF members that I run into, that when they speak about him, they don't call him B, they call him either BB or Cafe. But there's a lot more to this story that's not being disclosed, man. Like the issue with when he settled up with Big Smiley up there in the Bay. That had a significant role with Big Smiley's push and him not intervening with the position of leadership and authority that he had and staying neutral in that. I'm sure you have a little bit to add to that as well, because I know you have a little bit of information about this.
Yeah, there's not much to add to that particular case, man. But the fact that he wasn't, asserting himself in the deep facility dilemmas is one of the reasons that the higher ups weren't too pleased with him. I really don't know any of the facts about that, other than that was one of the deciding factors in him not being in good standings.
I mean, did he have the authorization to have old man hit at that time, Rafas? Or wasn't that kind of question?
I mean, no one person really ever has that authorization except in an emergency, but somebody of his stature would require a vote. You know what I mean? It's not something, a lot of things that have happened over the years where they're like, this individual is responsible for getting him killed. Well, if that was the case and one individual took it upon himself to authorize such a activity, they'd get whacked, bro. It's
Yeah.
especially someone like Brown Bob or the old man or any of them type of dudes. It's going to take a mutual decision amongst a majority of the category 3s.
But see, old man got, if I'm not mistaken, old man got get backs later on, Rafas, after he already got hit.
I'm not sure. I think he did come back for a while and then left again, bro.
I know he eventually left altogether, man, but I think he was still considered good in the early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken, man.
The last time I see him, he had a question mark on him in San Quentin and East Block. He was on walk alone. They were still acknowledging him and respecting him, but we weren't telling him nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's when Powder and Lucky and Suave and all them got pulled. You know what I mean? Through him. So, I mean, he still had the authorization to get them guys brought in. You know what I mean? But as far as we were concerned and as far as we were told, he was only to be treated with the respect allowed a fellow Solavo. You know what I mean?
You talking about Big Smiley or Brown Bob?
Talking about old man Rafa.
Old man Rafa. Yeah. I was hearing he was still cleared in 2000.
Big Smiley was already done at that point.
Yeah, I think he got expelled like around that time, man. Like shortly after you got recruited, he was already getting expelled, man.
Yeah.
This situation is a prime example. We know a little bit more, man. I've talked to a few people that were present at that time, and what people don't realize, man, is Brown Bob. He did his service. You know what I mean? He never turned on the O or nothing like that. But there was a lot of guilt, man, because he was one of the founders and co-signers of Nuestra Raza, as well as one of the ones that helped create the Norteños. I was told by another old school NF member that was doing stuff with Victor Outreach at the time, Robert Rios, Cornell, or Rabbit. You know what I'm saying? He's known BB since the 70s. I mean, they go back that far back. And he'd already left the organization and was doing Victor Outreach work and was in contact with him when he was doing stuff with Mother Against Gangs. And this is what people don't know. Brown Bob had a lot of guilt based upon the creation of the Norteños and how that transformed the streets, the gang lifestyle that started to affect his community where he was from. He was fully committed to the NF and what the organization represented, right, to the fullest. Yeah. But the creation of the Norteños and the conflict with the Sureños and how that just escalated, he was there in the beginning of that, before there was ever a North or South. He had a lot of guilt, so he felt like he could contribute out there in the streets. But at the same time, he was still trying to maintain his commitment to the organization, but he was trying to go in a whole different direction. And see, this is where the politics come into play with this whole situation. Man, I've heard different things, but let's be honest here. Neither you, me, or anybody that we know had any involvement in the investigation in what rendered this decision. So we don't know. All I know is you can sit there and make assumptions and give your perspective. It was a power play. Because regardless, I mean, Brown Bob, even he was an ex-OGB member. And as we know, every OGB member is going to have to be in headquarters. You know what I'm saying? Once you leave, you're not going to take that title with you to the streets. Am I right or wrong on that?
100% correct.
So him returning to the system, you know what I'm saying, and his influence he had on other members, because they were getting at him. Other NF members were telling him, hey, man, the brothers are talking about you, this and that. And I thought what was also interesting about this article is the involvement of Chavo. The one that you had issues with too.
Yeah, my buddy Chavo.
You know what I mean? You know, that was a whole interesting situation there, man. But the other thing that I thought was interesting with this case, right now, you know, today's time era, they're not doing this type of activities. They're not trying to go out there because of the heat. You know what I mean? The technology, the CSI, the forensic. I mean, you go there and do a hot one, you're not going to get away with it. It's not going to be beneficial or lucrative for the organization.
Yeah,
You're
the
no longer-
percentages are definitely way lower than they used to be as far as your ability to wiggle away from something like that.
when you start whacking dudes like this, it brings nothing but attention and indictments.
No doubt.
Like I said, it brings attentions and indictments, and so it takes, you know, with the new technology nowadays, you're less inclined to see people try to take out old hermits or old people that are doing these activities or even make a hit, unless it's a situation like recently with Tiz, because the both men are doing life already. You know what I'm saying? But what the other thing that I found kind of interesting, right? And this is just goes to show the different direction that the organization was starting to go. You had an NR member partake in a hit on an NF member.
Yep. Now anybody can do it.
You know what I mean? That used to be against policy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I said, you know, Dreamer, he flipped. Bad Boy, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think Bad Boy, they were going to whack Bad Boy afterwards. I think they were utilizing him to do this hit. And they had plans to expel him from the organization because he was already in trouble for a lot of stuff he had been doing in the past. I could be wrong, but another brother told me that years before. You know, it's just a shame, man, how, you know, a man, you know, whatever claims, you know, there's a whole different variables of reasons why, you know what I mean, this happened. You know, like I said, we don't know. We've heard the details. We've heard different stories. We've heard books. We've heard different accounts and reports. I think that there was only one purpose for this incident happening. It was a power play. It was to set an example. You know what I'm saying? There's a new sheriff in town. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I know that there was consequences behind it. And I think it's one of the reasons why you had issues with Cuete and a few others later on and under investigation for this whole incident occurring.
You know what's a funny point, man, is that you know, if supposedly Brown Bob wanted to make a ceasefire with the MA or something, and they wanted to hit him behind that, and Chuco, for example, was the driving force. Look who the driving force is in the current fucking end of hostilities with the MA now.
But see, is that true? I never heard it.
There's no saying. I've heard it is, and I've heard it isn't, man. You know, I mean, we weren't there. We don't know. I never heard him say that, but I've never been around him. I mean, so we're just going on, you know, folklore, basically. It's hard to say, bro.
Then why did he have old man hit? I mean, those are the same reasons why he had old man hit.
Yeah.
Was for allegedly, you know, in cahoots, and which old man actually had the support of certain other high-ranking NF members to form a peace treaty.
Yeah.
But his issue was it didn't go through the OGB process. He had him hit. Yeah, I mean, that could have been another reason. I mean, so I'm kind of, when I hear that he wanted a peace treaty with the MA, then why did he have old man hit?
Right. I agree.
You know, so, you know, I don't know if there's any truth to that. The only time I've ever heard that was in this article right here.
Yeah. I don't know, my man. I do know that caused significant, you know, significant division amongst, you know, NFNR, the whole movement, you know, about that individual being expelled.
It was 2 years after MC too.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? I
But check this out, YouTube, man. There was still some more of that article, man. If you want me and Flacco to finish that article and continue breaking it down, let us know. You know, we're at about almost an hour right now, so we're gonna shut this down. But you know, let us know in the comments if you want us to knock out the rest of that article. There's probably about another 20 minutes of reading, and we can continue breaking it down, man. But for now, it's your boy Rojo, Flacco, and we'll be back at you.